This week on Conservative Crossroads, regulation of artificial intelligence, or AI. Jim Pethokoukis says, keep it light. Ryan Girdusky says, make it heavy. Regulation of AI, coming up on Conservative Crossroads. Now. Welcome back to Conservative Crossroads, the program where conservatives lean into their differences rather than ignore them. I'm Henry Olson, Senior Fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center, and your host for this program. Today's topic is AI, or artificial intelligence regulation. It's a big issue, and we have two excellent people to discuss it. Jim Pethokoukis, Senior Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, believes it should be relatively lightly regulated, while Ryan Girdusky at Project 1776 PAC believes in a stronger sense of regulation. Our program always starts with 5-minute opening statements, and we'll start with Jim in just a moment. Ryan will then have 5 minutes to respond, and then we'll go on to 35 or 40 minutes of mutual questioning and light moderation from me. We will then have a 2-minute closing statement in reverse order. First Ryan, and then Jim. Ryan, hold your horses. Jim, you're up.
In the weeks back at the end of 2022 and early 2023, there was an immediate sort of rush to do something about AI. What that was, not entirely clear. There was, talk of a pause. That initial burst of sort of regulatory fever sort of subsided, and I was happy to see that, because my concern has been that because of, I don't know, a half century of our society marinating in sort of, fear of it was nuclear power, then it was, plenty of films about artificial intelligence and the Terminator, that our instinct would be, we need to regulate this. We're very concerned about taking jobs. We're very concerned about these kind of existential risk issues. Plus, coming off this period where distrust of big tech had risen, during social media. So I really felt like the time was right for a lot of regulation. We didn't get it. We still might get it. But what I would urge people who are in the, we have to do something and maybe we have to do it fast, is to focus on, I think, on the upside of AI, particularly in like our political context. I think one reason we've had sort of this, populist moment in this country over the past, I guess I would, not just 2016, but even earlier, was that we've gone through a very lengthy period of financial shock, uh, weak economic growth, wages not rising as high. And I think the impact on our politics has been incredibly corrosive. So when I look at AI, I see a lot of the things you think that Silicon Valley will talk about. Cures for diseases, miracle materials, all kinds of advances across the fields of science, which I certainly don't want to downplay. But I think less spoken about is that the politics of this country would be well served by a period of far more rapid economic growth. During the 1990s, you had rising inequality, uh, fast rising inequality. People seem to be a lot less concerned back then because they obviously saw their lives were getting better. Wages, not just the stock market was up, wages were rising. You didn't have to show them any statistics; they could feel it. Their lived experience was that their lives were getting better. And I think that creates a much more open politics, a more tolerant politics of others, a lot more trust in our fellow citizen, and almost more than any of the scientific gains. I view artificial intelligence as a way of accelerating growth, accelerating the rise in living standards, and create a much more, I don't want to say friendly, Uh, but I think more of a kind of society you would want to live in. So when we talk about regulation, I think we need to be extremely mindful of losing those potential upsides and not merely focus, as is so easy, because it's easy to think about the jobs that might be lost, very hard to think about like what the next job is going to be. It's very easy, given all the images in our brains of robots taking over. It's very easy to think about these existential kinds of risks. And because of social media, we all have an agenda of concerns about how technology will affect kids, will increase bias, all kinds of issues because we've been primed for social media and to glom those issues on to AI. I'm not saying we can't discuss those. I'm not saying those shouldn't be considered, but I think we really are right now have a rare moment, perhaps of the kind that we haven't seen in over 50 years, to really permanently accelerate the pace of growth in the American economy and the rise of living standards, and make the American dream so palpable that the issue of whether it is alive or dead or something of the past is not going to be a thing we talk about anymore. It's going to be obvious, and we'll just all have to worry where we're going to invest. Besides the Mag, was it the Mag 7?
Thank you, Jim. Ryan, you're up.
Yeah, that's a great optimistic take. I see all the benefits that AI could possibly bring that are technological advancements and higher living standards and certainly cures for diseases that they've talked about over and over again. However, I will say that part of the prosperity or social trust that lied in previous generations that James was talking about was so much so that was so much because of the people who were alive at that time. In the 90s, the greatest generation was alive still. Silent generation was senior citizens, and the baby boomers were still working. Those are three high trust generations that we don't have, that will not be replaced. And there's no evidence that AI increased social trust. If anything, there's really a lot of questions of whether it decreases it. And here's my opinion is that AI, everyone has said this is a mixture of the Industrial Revolution, the Renaissance, and I forget the other revolution they were talking about, and the scientific revolution all wrapped into one. And yet it is an industry that is less regulated than your toilet bowl water, than a ham sandwich. There's currently virtually no regulations on, actually pretty much no regulations on an industry. And in a day and age when your car is spying on you and sending your information to your insurer about how fast you're driving, what music you're listening to, there is a lot of questions over privacy. You know, you go to a doctor's office, it's supposed to screen you for all these diseases. Well, there's the companies have said, well, we're not sending that data anywhere. Okay, why isn't the same company that has the information of my body under the same requirements and the same HIPAA laws in the federal law? It's not. It's they say they're doing this, but we've seen technology companies defy their own standards over and over again. We've seen issues over intellectual data, intellectual privacy being ruined, and then the bigger problem that I have is as we've seen just last week with Mythos and with Anthropic's regular newest version of Mythos come out and be polled. I think it was called Fable 5, as they were just polled by the government, is that these AI companies clearly did not care enough that they were very easily giving technology to the hands of people who could use it for the worst things possible. That latest form of AI could absolutely be used to learn how to hack into our federal government. Now, and to our banks and all the rest of it, but I'm more worried about the federal government. What happens if a terrorist organization from Saudi Arabia or Iran or Qatar or whatever decides that they're going to hack into the FAA and planes can't communicate with men on the ground? Now, these are all giant questions that are there that are pervasive. And if you listen to a lot of people in the industry, they are insisting that you cannot regulate us at all, or the bare minimum, and we have to voluntarily choose to do it. And it takes really other members of that same industry to lobby against them. That's what happened with Mythos and Anthropic. And a lot of the problems with these founders and these leaders in Silicon Valley is not only are they selling hopes and dreams, but they're selling fears and anxieties. They're saying we're going to put you out of work, but it won't take that much work, but you'll be able to get rich, but you won't have any income. I don't know how we're going to pay for all these social services they're telling about with no income because we're not taxing data or AI. They're saying that we are going to have this immense prosperity, but there's a 20 to 25% chance that it's going to end humanity. And at a certain point, they are creating a situation where, and I very much believe this at this point, we are probably a few years away from one of these tech founders being assassinated for political reasons. Sam Altman barely survived with his life just in April. I mean, if it was a few minutes difference, he would have been murdered by an assassin. And an age where life as overall has become more peaceful, political violence has risen, and rather than waiting for a catastrophe, waiting for a tech leader to be assassinated, waiting for AI to be used in an assassination of a political leader, as by the way, AI has been used in mass shootings, as plot mass shootings, we should work on it ahead of time, those regulations. When we have to do regulations by knee-jerk reaction, as we saw with the Patriot Act, we get a lot of bad regulation. So let the smart people discuss what could be done now instead of waiting for a catastrophe, which will likely happen as with all new technologies, new catastrophes happen. Let's figure out how to mitigate those risks ahead of time.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Who wants to start off our discussion?
Well, I spoke first. Ryan did second, so I'll let him go. I'll go him go first in this portion.
Oh, okay. Well, no, it's just that's my I don't hate AI. I use AI. I try to keep up with the newest versions of this or that and see how it could work in my company and my life, and my employees use AI. So I have no opposition to the use of it. I think though that there are people who are using it to figure out how to do search engines better, which is how a lot of people are using AI, or how to do creative videos or expand YouTube channels. But there are people who are not using or using it for nefarious measures, and there are close to no. And by the way, not just terrorists, but like people stealing IP, people trying to do it, other things. And I think that there's no regulatory matter even being seriously discussed about how to avoid those situations or what to do.
Right. Well, uh, even though that wasn't exactly a question,
Yeah, sorry, I didn't know. I didn't know how.
but
I didn't know
I'll
to ask you a question. I'm so
I'll
sorry.
respond.
Yeah.
This I sort of when I think about it, I think about this in sort of two buckets. One bucket is sort of this is a new technology. It probably looks like it's going to be pretty important. It looks like it's going to be used across the economy in all kinds of different ways. It's what economists like to call a general purpose technology. Electrification was a general purpose technology. The internal combustion engine, modern chemicals, and of course the computer, all general purpose technologies. And they will likely have big impacts on society, but of the kind, this is sort of bucket one, but of the kind that we've seen before. There'll be disruption in the job market. There'll be new industries created. There'll be uses that we cannot anticipate for both good and ill. And we should discuss whether we need now. To be sure, we are not like a non-regulated society. We have lots of laws, consumer protection, product liability, negligence, all kinds of contract law, which any technology is not exempt from. So we do have lots of laws. Now the question is, do we need more specific laws for this technology? Which I imagine, that will continue to be that will be debated. It will be debated in the future. It will be debated on the state level. But it is the kind of debate very similar to what we saw with social media, in which we had to figure out, does this technology create harms that are somehow not covered by all the existing law we have in our litigious society to deal with harm? So that's like bucket one. And then there's the other one, which Ryan mentioned the issue over the weekend, over these, it was the last weekend when we were recording this with Anthropic's Fable 5 model and Mythos, where the potential harms are of a kind different, where you can imagine them being far more severe. You can imagine you could potentially imagine massive cyber attacks, shutting down grids. Forget about just like hacking the government. You can imagine and there's lots of wargaming going on in Washington about those kinds of downsides. And perhaps this is a technology of a kind that just won't disrupt a labor market, but maybe it will cause huge dislocations, much higher unemployment that we've experienced, at least temporarily. So just far bigger than what we ever saw with any of those other technologies I mentioned. And then there's, of course, maybe it becomes sentient and it decides it doesn't like us. So after it takes all our jobs, it kills us. And that's like the second bucket. Now the first bucket,
Pretty big a bucket there.
those are big buckets. But the first bucket, I'm that's a bucket where there's a lot of policy expertise in Washington, around the country, where we can debate it. And I'm not sure we need to rush a debate to deal with those kinds of
Yeah,
things.
but Jim,
Now,
wait,
now the other bucket, the other bucket, I think we need to. I do, and I can get into what I would do, but I do think that is a different kind of potential harm and also a different kind of potential upside. So what I don't want to do is kind of just take the two buckets, put it into a mega bucket, swish it all around, and then kind of have this unidentifiable, slop, no pun intended, where we kind of just take
yeah.
all our previous ideas from like the social media wars and then just glom them onto AI. I think it's really two categorically different kinds of
I
things.
understand what you're saying, but okay, so let's look at the first bucket for a second. One, you have no rights on privacy whatsoever when you give your data out to a doctor that you're going to get your body scan, and there's no telling that doctor, not the doctor can't, but the AI company that stores your data in the cloud can't then give the cloud information to your insurer. Let's say you're going to get cancer in 10 years, and your insurer says, you know what? Well, I need $1,500 a month then instead of your normal $200 a month. That's one issue, the privacy issue. But on a policy issue that is being discussed about how to deal with AI, and it's being discussed on both the left and somewhat on the right, is the idea that because we are going to experience either mass prosperity or mass unemployment, the government needs to own AI companies, either 50% in Bernie Sanders' numbers or 1 to 5% in Donald Trump's numbers, and then redistribute the wealth. That's socialism. Like, that is just socialism. Owning media production, redistribution of the wealth. Ro Khanna was on my
And
podcast.
you're for that.
No, I'm saying that's what
You're
they want to
you're for
do.
seizing those companies immediately.
But this is the thing is that your path of mass prosperity also very openly leads to socialism that people are advocating for right now. And I'm not for socialism. I would love everyone to just to work and get a job on their own and not have a government-backed job. And we're all shoveling for no reason, to create moats that we don't need or harvesting that we don't need. But the path to socialism, and Ro Khanna said this on my podcast, I'm going to use the AI revolution to get socialism to America. Bernie Sanders is betting big on AI to create the instability to get socialism. I really don't want socialism in this country. So I feel like let's get ahead of the curve a little bit before all we end up doing is the government takes it over, creates a general wealth fund like they do in Norway and Australia and in Alaska over energy, and the AIs are a new energy. But that seems very possible is how we get socialism in America is vis-a-vis AI. So we have socialism, mass catastrophe, or the Terminator. Those are three
Like
avenues that we're going down.
I thought you were going to do the Ghostbusters thing. Mass catastrophe, cats and dogs living together. I think that scenario is built on what I'll call a second bucket assumption that this is not just a important new technology, but it is going to create an outlier effect where we can just like throw out all our previous like beliefs of how economies work, and that there'll be like five people who own everything. All the rest of us will have to get like we'll have to get a UBI check. It's like in the future a factory will have will have every factory will just have like a dog and a person. And
And George Jetson working for 3 hours.
the dog's
Yeah.
job is to make sure the person doesn't touch the machine, and it's I
But
think
before,
that
but
kind of
that's what,
science
okay.
fictional scenario. Let me just finish my thought. I think like what your baseline scenario should be is that this is an important technology that will boost growth in a way that we've seen before, which has not led to socialism. I think to try to regulate and all these harms that
A
you've
lot of
mentioned.
times growth in the early 20th century did lead to socialism. So, I
Uh,
mean, that's not exactly the
I
truth.
believe the most recent example we had was the 1990s, and not only did it not lead to socialism, it led to
But let's say,
more
but let's
free
say Barack
trade. And
Obama. I mean,
but anyways, if I could just is that I think to say we need massive regulation for all the now because I'm worried that this is going to technology is going to make us so rich that we'll have so. I think there's like about 7 leaps in there that I would not make all at the same time.
okay, I did not make these predictions out of the clear blue sky. The people
Good, because
working in the
they are not
industry
good.
and the
These are
leaders
not
of the
smart
industry
predictions.
before their IPOs were going to go public were the ones saying this. When the IPOs went public and Stan Alman was almost murdered, all of a sudden everyone changed their trajectory on those two things
I
alone.
didn't. I have not changed my trajectory.
Not you. I'm talking the leaders of the AI.
Yeah.
The tech leaders were all, this is going to destroy your job. You'll own nothing, but it will be good. They were saying this almost universally. Their IPOs were going public. Sam Altman was almost assassinated, and everyone changed their opinions completely. And the problem of saying we'll just wait for the regulatory of the local governments and whatever, we've seen this play out in Michigan. In Michigan, they didn't want a data center in some town. The tech company was going to build it and said, so sue us. And the town did not have the money to sue a tech company. So I mean, we're playing with saying, oh, don't worry, we'll have local regulation, we'll have lawsuits, and by the time everyone figures everything out, we'll have mass prosperity. That's, I don't know. That's a very, very big gamble considering the largest new generation that's coming up do not believe the system is working for them. They're likely not going to own any shares of any of these stocks unless they're born into them or gifted them. And they're dealing with higher levels of underemployment than previous generation. I'm a millennial. We had the worst shaft when we began. We were shafted completely when we entered the workforce, and yet they find themselves in that situation in a society with lower levels of social trust, with politicians feeding them that anxiety and that anger and blaming billionaires and now trillionaires for everything. And I don't know. We have the idea that prosperity is going to bring the great equalizer. We've never been more prosperous and never been less trusting in our society.
Is your baseline scenario that what's going to happen is we're going to both have a rapid acceleration in economic growth, a unheard of dislocation in the job market, and those two things are going to cause uh lots of trillionaires and then everybody else on a basic income. Like, is that your baseline scenario?
No, 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 no. I think personally that a lot of companies are not using AI as fast as people predicted, and that's been shown in other groups that they don't use them as fast as people expect them. Though the technology is advancing very quickly, there's a lot of things like our energy sector and our grid that don't allow us to use AI in the capacity that they thought they were going to. We'll have very few relative trillionaires. We'll have a lot of millionaires, people who will make a lot of money off of it. But the gap then between millionaire and trillionaire is so significant that a millionaire feels like they're being shafted. That is the truth,
I
though.
listen. I listen. Public policy can't solve everything,
But
but
okay,
if the goal of policy is to help the millionaires who worry that they're not billionaires or trillionaires. If that is the key activist demographic, that may be on public
no,
policy.
but their kids are the key activist demographic.
The
Their
children
kids
of the millionaires.
No, the millionaire's kids. Well, now, Elon's daughter is
Hmm.
very activist, but that's really the ones who sit there and get angry about this and tell the rest
That's
of the
because right.
people.
That's because they're children. That's because their
No.
children
Oh
go
yeah,
there.
they've all grown up and
Yes.
become
Yes, that's
upstanding
because
right
they're
wingers.
25 years old and their brain's only recently solidified. I do
Did you
not
see
want
that?
to
No,
make public
that's
policy
such a
based on the
boomer
fears of
hot take. That's not
25-year-olds.
true. Look how Mandani was elected. It wasn't 18-year-olds, it was 40-year-olds voting for people like
Well, they're New York 40-year-olds. That's a
They're not
special
New
kind of
York
40-year-old.
40-year-olds. They came from all over the country to live in New York. But
Yes,
those
they're self-selected.
Yes, okay, but LA is about to do the same thing. Brandon Johnson got elected in Chicago. We can't pretend like these are just one or two things. They're telling these people over and over again, you will not have a chance because of them. All the anguish and all the anger of economic inequality is being fueled right now to a level we haven't seen since the early 1900s. And they're saying you are poor because they are rich. They're feeding completely into it. And there's a race thing in the middle of it. And by the way, while we're doing this and reducing jobs that we probably don't need, we are still at pace continuing mass immigration to this country for people who will never be able to get jobs. So we're importing more poverty while the AI revolution is going on. And no one has an answer for this except for socialists who are saying to them, don't worry, we're going to take care of
I
it. We
have
will
it.
own these companies. You
I have
can't.
an answer.
The word free market doesn't mean anything to the average population. They want to know you have a plan. And what I'm
I,
saying is, make a plan before we reach catastrophe level. Make a plan before their only other option is socialism, because we will not like the effects.
well, I would say that if your concern is that we're that the result is going to be socialism, I'm not sure tweaking HIPAA law is going to be
Oh,
strong enough.
that's a
But
different thing, but that
but
is
but what
also
but
very
I would say this. I certainly do not give a 0% chance at all to huge impacts, good or bad. But again, I think that for like a first step, you should look at how technology has affected people and what they believe about the system. And I think again, the most recent example that we have was in the early days of the 1990s. I think people they think about the 80s boom and then we won the Cold War, and they think the early 90s certainly must have been a period of great euphoria, but it was not. There were deep concerns about America's place in the world. We had a bad recession in 1990. There were concerns about, especially in the early days of the internet, about automation. There were articles by people on the left and right saying that the days of fast economic growth and big income gains were over. There was a lot of this sort of post Cold War concern. Within 5 years, despite rising, really the start of like the big inequality surge, despite all that, by 2000, like 80% of the people in this country thought we were headed in the right direction. And that is because the impact of this technology were not like we're growing 40% a year like science fictional, but economic growth, instead of growing at 2%, we started growing at 3 and 4. And the impact was such that, you know, setting anything else aside, the impact on people's wages, where they could see that, was so strong that all the kind of concerns you're worried about never happened.
well,
So I
James.
would, so I would just say in my closing to this section that if the result of AI is that we get a extended period of just 19, forget about science fiction, 1990s growth, the talk of socialism and that the system doesn't work. Because if I don't want to keep, studies show guy, but studies show when an economy is booming and there's growth, people just think like democracy works better because it kind of feels like it does. And they
It's
think
also
markets work better. I think that is a far more likely scenario than we are on a precipice towards socialism.
Okay, in Trump's first term, economic growth was very strong, and no one believed, not no one, but a lot of people didn't believe that a democracy was working. But in the 90s, when you're talking about income inequality and the growth of it, there were multiple things happening at the same time. It wasn't just we had a bubble of the internet. We had NAFTA, we had opening of China preferred preferential trade agreements with China, and we had 2.5 million illegal and legal immigrants per year. We had a mass demographic transformation over a course of 10 years under the Clinton administration. So you had multiple fronts, and yes, the internet was part of it, but it was much smaller than the opening to China, much smaller than NAFTA. Uh, the fears and the worries of economic inequality came out of that area. And when that happened, and we did lose those jobs as manufacturing jobs and other jobs, those areas never came back. 35, 40 years later, and there are literally millions of dead bodies who found their only hope and salvation in opioids. That's what filled them. And now all of this economic inequality is coming out of one sole industry that will affect literally everything, including your one day, your plumber will be the AI 2000 plumber, and we're saying, oh, it worked like the internet. Well, the internet was very slow in the late 90s. That was not the engine driver, maybe towards the very end of the decade, but certainly not in the middle of the decade. It was NAFTA, it was the opening of the WTO, it was the end of the Soviet Union. Those were the things that were driving prosperity. And it's a very big gamble to say it will work equally as well, because for a lot of people, the 90s were fabulous, but for a lot of people in the Midwest, the 90s was the end. There were towns that was the end of their entire livelihood. And we're going to say we'll do that to every industry at the same time on the same scale from one single entity. And by the way, don't touch it or regulate it because they're buying the elections or whatever they're doing. Not a great selling point for the future.
If I were to tell you, that starting at the end of 2027, that the
Hmm.
next 7 years, U.S. real GDP growth would average 4%,
Hmm.
an unemployment rate below 4%, and real income growth of 4%. Do you think, which is basically what I'm basically describing is the 1990s. Do you think that we will be living in a period of historic economic tumult where people will be saying, we need to tear down this system? I
Yeah.
find that unlikely.
We did though. We had since the year 2000, when the internet revolution really took off, the Iraq War and the 9/11 definitely shifted things. But take 2006, right? We'll make that the marker because after the Iraq War, 2006 was a change election, 2008 was a change election, 2010 was a change election, 2014 was a change election, 2016 was a change election, 2018 was a change election, 2020 was a change election, 2022, we'll put it, it's even 2024 is a change election. The American populace, through the growth of immense prosperity from 2006 to 2026, vastly wealthier, much more prosperity, and almost solely because of technology and the internet, have grown increasingly anxiety ridden, increasingly angry at our politics, increasingly unstable as a society, and have far more political rage towards politicians and wealthy people than they did 20 years ago. Part of that is demographics. High trusting generation is dying off. Young generation is surging. Super low social trust for multiple reasons. Internet part of it, mass immigration part of it, being a diverse generation definitely part of it. However, yeah, I 100% believe that. We had great growth, low inflation under the first Trump term. People were losing their minds screaming in the streets. It doesn't, and literally screaming in the streets. That itself will not generate, I think, the social stability that I think you're banking on this. And that's the upside. The downside is actually way worse.
I understand there. I understand that there are certainly people on the right who feel the need to call what we had in the first Trump term a boom. That's certainly not what I'm saying, and I certainly wouldn't classify it as a boom, anything like what I'm talking about. So maybe it's been so long that people just don't understand what like an actual boom feels like. But that is what is capable. And if you look at the history of technological change, there is often a period of great uncertainty before the benefits take place. And do I think that that is what we're in right now? I think yes. I don't think it's just because of AI, which we've been sort of primed by our culture, and unfortunately, I think as you correctly mentioned, by some AI CEOs, to think will be like a just a very stressful period. But again, I think that period, if this technology is important enough to cause that kind of tumult, it's also powerful enough to create the kind of growth, productivity growth, new jobs, which are of course inherently difficult to predict,
Hmm.
that will that will I really make these kinds of scenarios that you've outlined where we'll sort of daisy chain our way to socialism. Uh, you know, I don't think that's what I would default to.
Well,
Again, if you want to talk about like like low important but sort of low probability scenarios, and despite what like some AI CEOs, if you actually talk to like lots of people in the tech sector, lots of like what is like actually like I think people think the consensus view are these kind of extreme outlier scenarios when that is like not the real consensus view. Those kind of views get lots of play on television and headlines and on TikTok. But I feel like a lot of what we've spoken about and like your concerns are really discussing what right now should be like a low probability scenario. And do we want to make law today based primarily on a low probability scenario and what we think that self-selected New York, you know, immigrants to New York, what they might fear. I'm not
Well,
sure you're going to get good policy out of that.
I will say one. I'll say a few things. One, yes, tech CEOs are the worst people at their own PR, and they should probably stop talking or hire somebody. Them and Kevin O'Leary have never done themselves much favors. The other thing that I will say is I've said many things. I mean, I think privacy laws over your health data is not far-fetched in any way, shape, or form. That's an easy fix. It's literally an easy fix. Is if you use a lawyer if you use a AI chatbot to do your legal stuff, then that AI chatbot should be under the same legal ramifications of a lawyer. They can't say there's no regulations on the AI company, tons of regulations on your lawyer, tons of regulations on your doctor, and you expect them all to succeed equally. And then lastly, about the whole socialism thing, it's not Ryan Girdusky making this up. It's probably going to be half of the Democratic Party in the 2028 presidential election going to advocate for this. The most popular Democratic senator is advocating for this, and the Republican president of the United States is advocating for this. This is not a far-fetched thing that is a low probability. This train is moving towards socialism, and it's whether you're not you lay in the middle of the tracks and scream but the free market, or whether you say how do we actually slow this train down. Saying we're going to have growth for the sake of growth is only the ideology of libertarians and cancer cells. So you have to make a little bit more pragmatic decision on this. Whenever these had technological advances, we regulated it. Almost always, except we took a while for the internet. We got some regulations in the internet. Social media, not so much, but the internet had a few regulations.
Yeah, and social media, you're beginning to see regulation. One of the questions I just wanted to ask, and this is probably.
I feel like we've left you out here. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Please ask
no,
the
no, no.
question.
My job is generally just to sit back and be a pretty face. But there was a moment I've had a question for a while, which is that when I think about previous technological revolutions, what we're talking about is the creation of a machine which uses, energy that's not, self-exhausting. Like a horse, I call a tool because its energy is self-exhausting. Ideally, with a machine, comes from externally. It can never be self-exhausting if you've got the right supply of oil or electricity or so forth. But it always requires a human being to operate it. And a lot of our growth of in wealth is people moving from using tools to create food for themselves and farms to operating these machines and consequently appropriating some of that wealth in terms of wages. The promise of AI seems to be we no longer need people.
Right.
The people are going to be replaced by self-thinking operators or, ideally humanoid robots and so forth.
All right.
So where does the prosperity come from? And this is, kind of like the etiology of Ryan's concern, which is that, yeah, you have aggregate growth because somehow this money is being exchanged to the people who own the machines, but the people themselves are not actually needed to operate it anymore. So then you move down to the new jobs that are being created are jobs that don't require the operation of sophisticated machines. And what we know from that is unless you're a superstar like Michael Jordan in the entertainment industry, if you're not operating if you are not operating a highly skilled piece of machinery, your wages are not that high.
Well, if I first I have to apologize. I screwed up my joke. The joke is that in the factory of the future, there will be one dog and a person. It is the dog's job to keep the person from touching the machine, and the person's job to feed the dog. So that is
Okay.
because I have a dog. I love that joke. So, but I think the serious version is like I think what you've just described, which is a not entirely, but to an extent that we haven't seen before, is I think a worker free future. I you know I
Isn't that
think
what
to
AI
make that leap,
technology
I
super?
think
Isn't
that
that
it's a
what their
work to
fans
make
are
that leap.
promising us? Is a
I
work-free
listen.
future?
I having talked to like about this very issue with Silicon Valley people for I think over a decade, probably when I think this like a lot of this debate really began with or this version of the debate began when talk about autonomous cars. And I think the first thing like these CEOs thought of was like, oh, okay, this could cause a lot of jobs. So so I'm going to go Google, like, what do you do if a technology loses a lot of jobs? Oh, UBI. I think what these CEOs then and now gravely underestimate are all the constraints that make that kind of frictionless shift to a worker free future. Uh, I'm not going to say forever unlikely, but I think in any kind of like way, any kind of time frame in which we can like make effective policy, just not applicable. Do I want to be aware of that? Kind of a watchful waiting if the technology gets so good, perhaps. To assume that that the demand created by falling prices, that the new jobs created by new technologies will more than offset like job loss and task automation. Sometimes, maybe this time is different. We should be aware and watching closely, perhaps more than ever, an economy where this time might be different. But to make that leap and to make like guys like Andrew Yang, they would have had us on a UBI like last week. Like there's a certain market, that likes that idea, and a certain sort of policy entrepreneur that likes pushing those kinds of ideas. But I think they're really detached, not just from like what we're seeing now, uh, but I think what actually the consensus isn't that all jobs are going away. Far from it.
Right. No, I mean, what we're probably going to see is higher unionization and push for unionization to protect jobs. People will get up on the jump to get the unions moving and get them going, and that's why you've seen a little in Gallup polling. You've seen a big support for unionization over the last 2 years that hasn't been seen in decades. Higher trust for unionization. What we're also going to see, I mean, that no one ever talks about is if AI evolution stopped tomorrow, this is all that we're going to get. We'd probably see still mass disturbance in the job markets in places like India and second tier countries that you really have call centers and other things that AI can take the job of tomorrow. Those things are going to have entire industries just move to AI that will have global ramifications on allied countries where they say you're destroying our economy with your AI systems. That's under discussed as well. But I think that the big push will be for mass unionization and that the same way that the Actors Guild did it and Writers Guild did a couple of years ago was to protect them over AI. That was a huge part of it. And I think that will continue every other industry.
Right, right. Just like about this, like the socialism theory.
Hmm.
You know, so not only was like the global financial crisis, like a terrible shock, high unemployment, the thing like people like trust most in life, like the value of their home taken away from them, and also it happening just like at the point where we had gone through like a period of really strong growth where people were really optimistic, and then to have this happen and then go through this lengthy period of sort of slow job growth, slow wage growth, and which I certainly think, as I mentioned before, played a role in sort of this populist like growth. Um, but like that, you would have thought, like, isn't that the scenario that would have led to socialism? Like, kill
But
the bankers, when in fact, like, we didn't do that. And for all this, like all these, these change elections, 20, I'm sorry, but 2016, close election against, against an unpopular Democratic candidate,
mm.
um, who, when they finally got into, I don't, I mean, why wasn't the outcome that, that we're in the third Bernie Sanders term?
Well, the outcome was we got Barack Obama, and Barack Obama got us socialized medicine. That's what we got, and we got and we
Hey,
got and we
right.
got
The kids tell me he was a neoliberal, so I don't know
well,
who you're listening to.
and that's the scary thing is the next one won't be Barack Obama, and we got 60 Democratic senators and 200, I think it was 58 or 61 Democratic House members. So yeah, and once by the if we get that again, if we get the 60 Democratic senators and a Democratic president, it's not going to be Barack Obama. It's going to be way worse. And also, we'll
But they would
probably
do that anyways, right? Like,
what
hey, I know RA, like,
what
right? I
no,
mean,
but we will
they're
not
gonna
we
do
will
all
not
like the most liberal things they could possibly think of because they have 60 votes.
No, but they will. I mean, and the thing is that we won't get we won't be able to even we'll get Puerto Rico as a state, we'll get DC as a state, we'll get 13 members of the Supreme Court, or 22 members of the Supreme Court, and best of luck for institutions like AI. I mean, I guess it'd be AI, and we'll be able to write theory about how this could be better. But they are absolutely saying this. They're saying out loud, this is how we finally, but this is the horse we're gonna ride. We are riding AI to the social revolution in this country. And that is the plan on the left. It is a game plan. It is perfectly projected. 2028 candidates are going to be running on it. Everyone who defies it, even Josh Shapiro has been backpedaling on data centers, and he was Mr. Data Center. Abigail Spamberger, her numbers are crazy for many reasons, but part of it is because of her refusing to take tax credits away from the data centers. This is what we are all seeing this happen in real time right now. And yeah, imagine the 2008 financial crisis. Only imagine extends for instead of 1 year, 1 year and a half of double-digit unemployment, a decade until the new jobs start showing
Right.
up.
But again, that's you're the assumption. The assumption is that it's going to be bad. The assumption is that when the head of Microsoft's AI unit says that pretty much that with 18 months, all the jobs you can do behind a screen
Right. They're selling
will
a
be
lot of
automated.
nonsense,
That
but
is again, but that is an absurd assumption. I certainly one would not make policy based on that. And anyone who's saying that within 18 months, all those jobs are going to be automated
right.
and decides to run a political campaign, I think the first question I would ask at the debate is the employment rate is 4%. I thought you said all the jobs are going to be automated.
Right. Debating on just purely numbers really works a lot in
Well,
America.
I think that would
But
be obvious.
the head of
That would be
Anthropic,
obvious.
the head of Anthropic, the head of Meta, the head of Google, the head of Microsoft, and whatever X's or Elon's companies have all said the same thing. And ChatGPT, they've all said the same thing at some point.
They're all bad
AI is going,
economists.
really? They haven't said in the
No,
last
I
10.
said they're all bad economists.
But the point is, we're not feeding I am not feeding this information to people and saying you should believe in doom and gloom. People believe in doom and gloom because the people who are selling the AI stuff are saying, I'm going to take your job and you have no choice in it. And
Yeah,
that
they
is
shouldn't. I agree with you. They
that
shouldn't
is
do
what
that.
That's
not
what they have
helpful.
told people for 5 consecutive years. Until their companies went to IPO, until they hit the market, they told everybody for 5 years, I'm going to take your job and there's nothing you could do about it. And I'm going to be a trillionaire. And you don't think people are angry right now? And you don't think they don't care what the numbers
But do you
say?
think it matters if it happens? Or do you think
Yes, of
people's
course it
views
matters if it
are
does.
it's so concrete that even if they find themselves every day going to work and their job hasn't disappeared, that because of what the AI CEOs told them, they'll still think their job isn't there?
I will say
They'll
this.
know they have a job, right?
I'll finish on this point.
All right.
A third.
And then we're going to turn to our closing
Okay, a
statement.
third of the population, or more than a third, or close to 40% of the population, don't trust either party on AI right now. They don't trust Democrats or Republicans. It is the largest issue that has no concrete support in. The answer Democrats have is socialism. It is a terrible, terrible concept. Republicans' answer of nothing is even worse. You have to have some kind of answer to feed these people's fears and anxieties, and that is what this moment is about. And the answer can't be, well, don't do anything. We'll see what happens.
I guess my closing statement, if I can go just my closing statement would be, I think it is a there is a reasonable, if not likely, possibility that the 2028 election, which has come up several times, the main issue will be about inflation, housing affordability, cost of living issues, as it was amazingly 4 years ago. Same issue set, with AI, a secondary issue. That is because all the jobs will not be gone in 18 months. In fact, we may even have stronger growth because of AI. That will not be, but I guess if I were about to put together a campaign, I guess only if I were a long shot candidate who really needed something to break would I make it about AI taking all the jobs and I have the solution. I think if I were a candidate, I would focus on a lot more of those very boring meat and potato issues that I think they're probably going to be far more relevant. And if I'm wrong, well, we can come back and you can say, just like my kids do, you blew it again. You missed that one. And since we'll both be unemployed, we'll have plenty of time to do it.
You work for a nonprofit, you'll never be unemployed. Um,
Ryan, last word, 2 minutes.
there was a poll done by the brilliant data analyst David Shore. He's a lefty, but he's a very smart lefty, and he said that there's no issue that is growing of importance and more left-wing on than AI regulation. It is growing faster than concerns over AI is growing faster than gasoline in Iran. I think you're underestimating how anxiety-ridden young people are, how anxiety-ridden their parents who hold their student loans are. And the longer that they can't get a job, everyone who owns a who signed on to a student loan debt, which is not forgivable even in bankruptcy, those fears become palpable. And obviously, it won't just be about AI. There'll be a million other issues people care about. I'm sure Gaza will make its way through the forefront eventually because apparently it always has to. It's like a law now. We have to mention Gaza every 30 seconds. But this is, I think that this is the most consequential issue. And like healthcare, which Republicans have never formed an actual like believable answer on, we're going to be in a situation that's far worse. That will be like healthcare, but more impactful. And young people's answer is going to be like, "Oh, the guys offer me socialism." I think half the Democrats running are going to say we're going to take over the AI companies, and they're going to say we follow Donald Trump's model of taking over other companies. We're going to do that, but not only do that, we're going to give you a check afterwards. And yeah, that's my big fear, and that's what I think might very well happen.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, James. And thank you, listeners. Please join me again in 2 weeks where we'll have another exciting episode of Conservative Crossroads. Take care.